Today we're going to be talking about my pure Landslide build that I've been playing since the season start. It's been a pretty great experience. I leveled with Landslide and then I've just been playing it for the last week, and truthfully I don't think it has a lot of weaknesses. It's one of the best Tormented boss killers, if not the best. Just the way that it interacts with overpower and being able to guarantee an overpower at the beginning of a Tormented boss fight, it's tough to beat it. It's actually one of Druid's best speed farming builds, mainly because of the change to Poison Creeper. Now that Poison Creeper can be cast while you're moving, you can do speed 101 pits extremely quickly. Pretty consistently doing under 2-minute clears, sometimes like a minute and a half, minute 20 seconds if you get a really good run. It's going to be one of the best pit pushing builds as well for the Druid. I think 145 is the highest clear that I've seen. Personally, I've done a 137, but I haven't tried to push any higher than that yet. I think it probably has the potential to go up to about 150, though. I would say that if you wanted to give it a weakness, it would be probably the Infernal Hordes, although it does totally fine, and with the insane damage output that we have, you kill things extremely quickly in there. It's just a matter of not having just, screen-wide AoE. The AoE from Poison Creeper Landslides is decent, but it's not going to be, Lightning Spear or something along those lines where you're off-screening things. So hopefully this video clears up some of the questions that I've been getting asked in my other videos on the build. And I'm going to put an entire section later on in the video just going over Spirit and different potential fixes for having Spirit issues. So let's get right into it with the abilities. So Landslide, this is going to be our main damage dealing ability. You crush enemies between 4 pillars of earth, dealing damage. The first modifier after Landslide damages enemies 4 times, the next hit will immobilize. And then the second modifier, when you immobilize or stun an enemy, you gain a Terremote. And then each enemy hit by Landslide consumes a Terremote, causing a guaranteed critical strike with increased damage. And then bosses always have a 10% chance to grant a Terremote when they're hit. So Landslide is going to be paired with the aspect of the Aftershock. So this reads, Landslide's earth pillars each strike a second time, and then deal an additional 26% bonus damage per hit. We'll also be getting percentage chance for Landslide projectiles to cast twice on the weapon and the Earthbreaker Ring, and then also the Earthbreaker Ring's unique ability. Casts of Landslide leave behind tectonic spikes. Then when you spawn Landslide pillars within those spikes, you have a percentage chance to spawn 2 instead. So as you can see, it gets pretty insane just how many Landslide pillars we can actually spawn with multiple different ways to proc extra ones and double pillars. It gets pretty nuts. So next up we have Poison Creeper. So this is going to be our way to poison enemies. We're going to get increases from things like Envenom on the skill tree and the Amulet to get extra critical strike damage against poisoned enemies, and some other synergies like that we'll talk about later during the gear section. This will be paired with the Subterranean aspect. So this reads, Poison Creeper's active also casts landslides in a circle around you. And then Earth skills deal increased damage to poisoned enemies. So this is going to be our main source of AoE. Self-casting Landslide, it's better than it used to be. It has a higher radius this season, but it's still a pretty small area of effect. This gives us some AoE much needed. And again, like I said before, you can actually cast Poison Creeper while moving now. So you don't necessarily even have to stop and you can deal damage. We're going to pair this with the Pack Leader Spirit boon. So on lucky hit, critical strikes have up to a 25% chance to reset the cooldown of your companion skills. So Landslide has a decent lucky hit chance, but you can imagine that with all of the hits that are happening on just a single cast of Landslide, and then also considering that we are guaranteeing crits, you're able to reset the cooldown of Poison Creeper constantly. So we are running Landslide as a werebear due to the Vasily's Prayer helmet, and so for the most part, simplified version of the gameplay here is you'll be self-casting Landslide in werebear form, and then when you proc Pack Leader to reset the cooldown of Poison Creeper, you're going to cast Poison Creeper. You just want to make sure that you have tectonic spikes on the ground consistently, because you can get some loops going on where Poison Creeper is just constantly resetting itself. And when you cast Poison Creeper, you go into human form. Then you'll go back into bear form when you're self-casting Landslide. So this loop itself, for the most part, will take care of all of the various shape-shifting bonuses that we're getting from gear and the skill tree. But that does bring us to our basic attack. So I'm running Claw, which is a werewolf skill, with just the one modifier for 20% increased attack speed. This is going to help as well with the various shape-shifting things that we're doing. Technically, you could definitely run something like Storm Strike for more damage reduction, or Wind Shear for more movement speed, but there are some bonuses, for instance, Heightened Senses that we're getting that if you don't have some way to turn into werewolf form, you're not getting the full benefit of. So next up we have Petrify. This is going to be our ultimate ability. This is going to give us a critical strike damage bonus multiplier. And again, like we already talked about, this build has insane lucky hit potential. And so we pair this with the Calm Before the Storm Spirit Boon. And this reads on Lucky Hit, nature magic skills have up to a 10% chance to reduce the cooldown of your ultimate skill by 2 seconds. So especially when you're fighting mobs that are a little bit tankier, you are going to just constantly be resetting the cooldown of Petrify. Running Earthen Bulwark, the main reason for this is that it's going to give us Unstoppable. This is our first source of Unstoppable to get out of crowd control effects. And then for the last ability, I'm currently running Trample. This is a second Unstoppable source, also a movement speed ability. The nice thing about Trample is that we're running the Insatiable Fury chest piece, which gives us ranks to werebear skills. So you don't have to actually put any points into this. You just get it for free effectively. This could also easily be another defensive ability though. We're also getting Debilitating Roar for free. So you wouldn't necessarily have to put points into it if you wanted to run that here. You could also run Cyclone Armor or even Blood Howl if you wanted to. So there's some options there. Personally, I think it's better to have the two sources of Unstoppable, but that's up to you guys how you want to play it. So next up, let's take a look at the skill tree. So we've got 1 point in Heart of the Wild. This is to get up to Wild Impulses. It's going to increase our spirit cost, but we're going to deal more damage. We've got 3 points in Predatory Instinct for the crit. Then we've also got 3 points in Iron Fur for damage reduction while in werebear form, and then persisting for 3 seconds after leaving werebear form. And we're getting extra ranks of this from the Insatiable Fury chest piece. We've got 3 points in Clarity. After you cast a companion skill, your next Core or Wrath skill has increased critical strike chance and increased damage. So we've got a bunch in this cluster here. So I've actually got 1 point in Elemental Exposure, Charged Atmosphere, and then up to Bad Omen. So the reason for this is if you're running the Electrocution glyph on the Paragon board. That is going to be your highest potential damage, but you also have to consider the opportunity cost of running these 3 points. So we'll talk about that more when we get to the Paragon board. And, you know, there are other potential things you can do with these 3 points. Like you could take those 3 out and put 3 points in Defensive Posture for more DR. You could put 3 points into Heightened Senses for more DR and movement speed. You could put some extra points into Crushing Earth potentially, although I'm looking more for boss damage than I am for, damage against normal enemies. There's a couple points in Mending that we don't have for more life while in werebear form, things like that. So yeah, we'll talk more about that though when we get to the Paragon board. I've got 1 point into Mending to get over to Provocation. This is going to give us a guaranteed overpower every 12 seconds while we remain in werebear form. So this takes a little bit longer to get to this guaranteed overpower in this build, just because, again, like I said, you're going to be in human form a decent amount with casting Poison Creeper, but it's still insane. You'll see the gigantic spikes in damage, and especially you're definitely running this when you're killing Tormented bosses, when you're using that version of the build from the planner. But yeah, the build does some absurd damage with overpowers. I'm pretty sure the highest overpower that I've seen was 8 billion, I believe. I couldn't find the footage of that, but I'm pretty positive I saw an 8 billion at one point. Definitely a 5 billion, but I think it went up to about 8 billion at one point in time. So we're running 1 point in Crushing Earth, 3 points in Stone Guard for more damage if we have Fortify over 50% of our max life, and then 1 point into Safeguard so that our critical strikes with Earth skills will fortify us. We've got 1 point in Neurotoxin. This is just to get down to Envenom. We've got 3 points in this and then extra points from our Amulet, getting increased critical strike damage against poisoned enemies. Currently running 3 points into Defiance for more damage versus elites. 3 points in Natural Disaster, more damage with Earth skills versus vulnerable enemies. And then I currently have 3 points in Resonance. This is just basically going to be 6% increased damage. This is another one that could easily be swapped out for something else. You can go, like I said before, Heightened Senses, Defensive Posture, something like that. We've got 3 points in Quick Shift, and then extra points from the Amulet. And then currently I'm just getting 3 points in Heightened Senses from my boots. So key passive is kind of interesting. You get some options with this. So I think at this point, because I've really leaned into the overpower side of this build, that I think Ursine Strength is the best. The fact, too, with Ursine Strength that you get actually increases to it from running the Insatiable Fury chest piece kind of puts it over the top as well. But you're getting maximum life, you're getting increased damage while healthy, and increased overpower damage. Pretty insane key passive for this build. Potentially, though, you could definitely run Bestial Rampage. This is going to give you increases to attack speed and increases to your damage, but I'm kind of happy to be not running this. I feel like every build that I've ran for the past, pretty much all of Season 4, just about every build had this in it. It's just kind of annoying to keep up and manage, so it's kind of nice that it's not in the build, but still really good. You could definitely run it. Now, you also have the option of Earth and Might. Now, if you're building into this, you're going to gear out a bit differently. You're not going to be stacking crit chances much. But two of our pretty close to mandatory items, Earthbreaker and Ring of Starless Skies, already have high crit chance on them. And even though we are guaranteeing crits a lot of the time with the Terra Motes from the Landslide modifier, we still build into crit so that we have high crit chance against bosses. Next up for Spirit Boons. So the majority of the time you're going to be running Wariness for 15% reduced damage from elites. But if you're running lower level content where you don't need that DR and you're not movement speed capped, then you could run Advantageous Beast for 15% increased movement speed. We're going to be running Avian Wrath for the 30% critical strike damage increase, Pack Leader like we've already discussed, and then Calm Before the Storm like we've already discussed. So for your last Spirit Boon, you've got some options, and it's going to differ based off what content you're running. So I really like Obsidian Slam. Every 10th kill will cause your next Earth skill to overpower. I think it's really good. I think it's good for any kind of pit content where you're either pushing or doing speed running. Feels great in Infernal Hordes. Would definitely run it there. But your other options here, so if you're having spirit issues, you could run Energize. So Unlucky Hit, dealing damage has up to a 15% chance to restore 30 spirit. This alone, if you're having spirit problems, will probably just take care of all of it, basically. So keep that in mind. And then if you're doing like Tormented bosses, or, really any content at all, you could definitely run Iron Feather, 20% maximum life. I would say when you're doing Tormented boss runs, your two options would be Iron Feather and Scythe Talons for 10% increased critical strike chance. One of the two. I would probably go Iron Feather, though, because keep in mind that this is also going to increase the damage of your overpowers. All right, next up, let's take a look at the gear. So again, Vasili's Prayer. This is going to give our Earth skills the Werebear tag, and they're also going to fortify us for 3% of our maximum health. This is a pretty insane item now. You get percentage willpower, maximum life, armor, and then ranks to defensive posture, which is damage reduction while fortified. So if you get a Greater Affix Armor Vasili's Prayer, and then Masterwork crit it twice, that's all the armor that you need for the build. There are other ways to take care of your armor. More than likely you'd have to do that with getting some rolls on your pants, but this is going to be your most efficient way to take care of your armor. So we've got the Insatiable Fury. It's going to give us percentage max life, Werebear overpower damage, bonuses to Ursine Strength, and then Iron Fur, which again is DR while in Werebear form, and 3 seconds persisting after. And then also up to 5 ranks to our Werebear skills. For the gloves, so I currently have max life, which I think I would rather have max willpower here. This is where you're going to get Unlucky Hit, a percentage chance to make enemies vulnerable. This is the only way we're making enemies vulnerable. Again, like we've talked about, we're lucky hitting so much that this is all you need. And then we're going to get ranks to Landslide. Ideally, you're going to have a Greater Affix ranks to Landslide here. You can get up to 8 ranks to it. For Tempers, I went Earth Critical Strike Chance, and then I actually ended up bricking this item. So Chance to Slow is not what you want. I would much prefer to either have Chance to Stun or Chance to Freeze. And then again, we're running that subterranean aspect here for the Poison Creeper landslides. So for the pants, we're running Legendary Pants. We're getting all res here. This is going to get us to the all res cap of 70%. Running Willpower, Maximum Life, Tempered Maximum Life, and then I've tempered Petrified Duration here. And then we're running the Skinwalker's aspect. So when you use a shape-shifting skill that changes your form, you heal for 20% of your maximum life. And if you're at full life, gain the same amount as Fortify. This is a pretty insane item now. It's been changed in this season. And again, with how much we're shifting back and forth, this really takes care of the majority of the healing that you're going to need. You are still going to potion from time to time, but unless you're getting one shot by something, for the most part, this is going to take care of your healing. We're running Wildheart Boots unique, so this got a huge buff this season as well. The damage multiplier can go up to 60%. So ideally here, I think you would like to have GA'd movement speed. Then it also has shape-shifting attack speed, cold res, and then ranks to heightened senses, which is going to give you movement speed and a damage reduction. Then we've got life gems in the armor at the moment. So for the weapon, you're going to run a two-handed mace. It's going to give you overpower damage as an implicit. And then we went willpower, maximum life. Currently have a chance to restore primary resource on lucky hit here. We need one roll of this. They could also potentially be on the amulet instead, and we could put critical strike damage here. So I've decided to put damage to crowd-controlled enemies on the weapon. With how we have our Paragon board set up, getting some damage to crowd-controlled enemies there, if you get a decent roll of this stat on the weapon, and then Masterwork crit it one time, that takes care of all the damage to crowd-controlled enemies that you need. And the reason for this is you need 250% damage to crowd-controlled enemies to cap out the recently buffed Earthen Devastation Paragon legendary node. And then we also have tempered here, chance for landslide projectiles to cast twice. So on the amulet, we're currently running Quick Shift. I rolled in Venom on the amulet, and then I've got maximum life on this. Also tempered Earth Critical Strike chance, and then ranks to movement speed while in werewolf form. So again, I think that what you want on the amulet is 3 damage passives. That's not the easiest thing to get. You're going to probably have to buy it and spend a ton of money to do so. My recommendation would be to try to probably just buy a greater affixed quick shift amulet and roll in Venom on it, because GA and Venom amulets are very expensive. But if you can get an amulet that's already got 2 passives, then that third stat you can roll into another passive, and that's going to be the maximum damage. You've got some options too if you want to go for another passive there. I think in the planner I've recommended Natural Disaster. Technically the highest damage is going to be Wild Impulses, but it's going to also increase your resource costs. And then something like Defiance is totally fine as well. So we're currently running Aspect of Changeling's Debt here. You deal increased damage while hitting a poisoned enemy as a werebear. So there has been some reports about Changeling's Debt being bugged and not working. So I have personally tested this extensively, and from everything that I've seen, it is working totally fine with landslide hits. There may be other interactions going on with it that it's not working, but from what I've seen, it's working totally fine. But I would urge you that if you're playing this build and you're putting extensive time into it, test it for yourself. Go to the training dummy and test it out. If you're concerned about it not working, you could put the Aspect of Retaliation here. So then we've got the Earthbreaker Ring. This has been buffed this season as well. We're getting critical strike chance, earth attack speed, chance for landslide projectiles to cast twice, and then ranks to landslide. So for the most part, you're probably going to want to pump your masterworking into ranks to landslide here, but critical strike chance isn't bad either. If you get a GA landslide projectiles and you get a high roll on your two-handed weapon of landslide projectiles, that pretty much takes care of all of that you need. And then of course, like we already talked about, the unique ability where we are getting extra landslide pillars to spawn. And we've got one mythic in the build, Ring of Starless Skies. This is an absurd item now. We get attack speed, critical strike chance, lucky hit chance, and ranks to core skills. And again, we're probably looking for either ranks to core skills or critical strike chance when we're critting masterworking there. And then the unique ability, getting tons of resource cost reduction and damage. Now, one thing to keep in mind is you could go with a one-hander and a totem. If you're going to do that, then you're going to put Aspect of the Aftershock on your amulet instead, and you're going to run Changeling's Debt and Aspect of Retaliation. But the main reason to do this, in my opinion, is that you can get an extra critical strike chance roll. So if you get like a G8 critical strike chance totem, you can get very close to being critical strike chance capped. All right, next up we have the Paragon board. So in the first board, I currently have Electrocution here. This has the highest potential damage, and it's really there for single target bosses, things like that. But again, you do need to consider the opportunity cost here. You could also just run the Werebear glyph here, which is going to give you 15% damage reduction and some damage. It then also saves you 3 points on the skill tree to then put into other things. So you'll see in my planner that I've got the Werebear glyph here with a different skill tree without Bad Omen on a couple of the different versions. But I would definitely run this for pit pushing. So the first board is going to be Heightened Malice. So we're grabbing a glyph here. It's going to be Earth and Sky. This is going to give us some damage reduction from poisoned enemies, and then also a damage multiplier against vulnerable and crowd-controlled enemies. Then we move into Ancestral Guidance, and we're grabbing Dominate here. Overpower damage, and then also a damage increase when we overpower an enemy for 5 seconds. We get some Spirit on Kill from this board, and then we're also grabbing Ancestral Guidance, which is another 30% damage multiplier. Then we're going to move up into Constricting Tendrils. So here we're grabbing Outmatch. It's going to give us some physical damage against non-elites and bosses, and then also is going to increase the rare life node here to get some more life. So from there, we're going to move over to Earth and Devastation. So the glyph here is going to be Fang and Claw. Then we're grabbing Earth and Devastation, and I'm not even capped out on this at the moment. Like we talked about, with a high roll of damage to crowd-controlled enemies on the weapon, you can cap this out. We're also getting some damage to crowd-controlled enemies as we path through here, along with some life in the Constricting Tendrils board. So from there, we're going to move to the left into Survival Instincts. So here, we're grabbing Spirit for more critical strike damage, and then we're pathing down to Survival Instincts, and then through some damage reduction while fortified as well. And then we go back into the Heightened Malice board, grab Heightened Malice, along with some Poison Resin life here. Alright, so let's quickly talk about, again, just all the different potential changes and things that you can run to help you with spirit issues. We already went over a lot of that, but I'm going to consolidate it here real quick and talk about it one more time, and I will timestamp this in the video as well. So, again, one of the easiest ways to just take care of any spirit issues you're going to have is to run the Energized Spirit boon. Keep that in mind. And then you've also got Earth and Might that you can easily swap in. And for the most part, unless you get really unlucky, this should take care of your spirit issues. Potentially, instead of Ring of Starless Skies, you could run the new Cataclysm Ring that gives you just unlimited resources, and then swap out Petrify for Cataclysm. Keep in mind that Ancestral Guidance does not work while you have unlimited resource from that ring, so you'd have to swap around the Paragon board a bit. And then one other option, let's say early on, you don't have Ring of Starless Skies, and you're just running a Legendary Ring. So what you could do is you could run the Starlight Aspect. You gain up to 40 of your primary resource for every 20% of your life that you heal. And again, like we talked about with the Skinwalker Aspect, we're constantly healing, and it's exactly 20% that we heal for. So just keep in mind that this seems to not be working with overhealing. So if you're at maximum life, you're not taking damage, this isn't going to work. All right, I think that's going to about do it. The build worked out pretty much as well as I had hoped it would before the season started, and I hope you guys enjoy it too. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.